Good morning to you, Mark Sutton with HurricaneTrack.com here. Hurricane Outlook and discussion time. Quite a few things to discuss in the tropics, not just Dorian. Over here in the western Gulf of Mexico, we have potential tropical cyclone number 7. This is that new thing that they do when something looks like it's going to develop, and it is close enough to land that it looks like advisories need to be initiated to get the products going. Well, here we go. Forecast to become a tropical storm, and if it does, it'll be Fernand. That's the next letter. We already had Aaron. This will be Fernand, and into Mexico it goes. A flood risk down here south of Brownsville, Matamoros area. Heavy rain, gusty winds, some storm surge at the coast. But it's there. It shows you that it is hurricane season. Peak time is coming up, September 10th, roughly the climatological peak. Then we have this area out here. Not much chance that this goes on to develop. It is south of Bermuda, so some gusty winds, rainfall, and you need the fresh water, so any rainfall that can fill up your freshwater supply is welcomed and appreciated, generally, as long as it's not too much or it stays too long. Then way out here in the far eastern Atlantic, we have this system that is going to develop into the next named storm. That would be Gabrielle, and then beyond that, looking at the 5-day graphic right there, another system forecast to come off, and this one 60% chance. Global computer models indicating a very favorable pattern will be setting up across this region for development over the next 4 to 6 weeks. Then we have to see as this traffic moves out. We need air traffic control in here, I'm telling you. And that's kind of what the National Hurricane Center reminds me of, directing and dealing with all these different blips on the radar screen, so to speak. But the analogy stands, firm that once you get all this traffic out and you have the loss of ridging over here, clearly, because if not, Miami would, have $200 billion worth of damage starting today probably. But that's not the case because we lost the ridging over here. Once this leaves, it looks like the Atlantic Ridge is going to start to try to build back, and we just have to see how that evolves. The bottom line, after Dorian, and I mean I'm saying after Dorian as if it's gone already, we still have a lot to deal with Dorian. We will have plenty to track, so please keep that in mind. I'm not trying to be alarming. It's just the way it is this time of year. It should be expected. All right. Instead of going over the statistics on Dorian, we know that it's moving a little bit now. The wind is still coming down. The pressure is rising, but it is still a large wind field, surge generating, rainfall producing machine that can bring damage and loss of life if people are not prepared or they do something. Thank you, Windows, for that chime. If people do something that goes against common sense, okay? I don't like to call people stupid. I like to say that they didn't use common sense, because life's hard when you're stupid. And so we know that. So use common sense. So I want to point out the different hazards here. Obviously the wind, I think, generally speaks for itself. People think of hurricanes, they think of wind. Storm surge, I want to continue to focus on this. We know that in the Bahamas, still that is a remaining problem, and the stuff we're seeing coming out of there just defies it's redefined what we think of when we think of tropical cyclone interaction with a land area, and especially these islands over here of the northwest Bahamas. So going forward, and remember, this is all above ground forecast if it happens around the time at high tide. So this is the area that I want you to focus on here. Flagler, Volusia County line up to the South Santee River in South Carolina, 4 to 7 feet. And I've talked about this the last few days. That's a lot of inundation. And so you think Charleston Harbor, that area, the low-lying areas along Georgia, and not every area is going to see these amounts, but that's the projections from the guidance. These storm surge models are indicating this based on the big wind field of Dorian, and you do not have to have the center make landfall to get those storm surge values. The wind blowing across that ocean for that period of time piles up the water. Lantana, Florida to the Flagler-Volusia County line, 3 to 5 feet. And then north of Deerfield up to Lantana, 2 to 4. And I expect these numbers will go higher up north at some point. And eventually we will see a hurricane watch posted for portions of the Carolinas here beyond where we see already with South Carolina. If you look at the map here, the pink in here is the hurricane watch. I expect that this will be extended up the coast and maybe up into just south of Norfolk, probably tropical storm watch there. But it's coming. All of these impacts, the slow-moving nature of the hurricane, these impacts will be shifting to the north with time. Looking real quick at just the 3-day version of this, come on, gives us a little bit of a better vantage point that you don't really need to connect the dots. That's not helpful. And let me explain this. I don't know why they actually let you put the line on, because it doesn't necessarily do that. Honestly, you know, the center could come up and get closer and then cut across like that. All right, some of the modeling is indicating that. So just kind of, and probably I shouldn't even have shown you this, but that's the center, and that's what I want to show you here. That's the eye of the hurricane. Those impacts, that orange circle and then the burgundy circle, whatever, all of this is going to move up the coast and probably even get larger with time. And so you folks up, especially in South Carolina, the Low Country, Charleston, north, and really the Outer Banks here, Cape Lookout up to Cape Hatteras, possibly even the beaches of Brunswick, New Hanover, Onslow, Carteret in North Carolina, big impacts are coming. And I think this is where the United States could see some rather significant problems. And it makes sense because a hurricane is forecast to be the core of it just offshore, and any deviation would bring the center onshore. And I'll talk about some of these potential impacts more in just a moment. Satellite presentation certainly degraded from what we have seen, but this represents a tremendous amount of energy in the atmosphere coupling with the ocean. There's the center right in there. It's finally moving. And the water underneath Dorian's path, all up along where it's forecast to track, is plenty warm, and I don't want to say undisturbed, but it haven't had an eye wall of a Cat 5 sitting over it. So it does have the Gulf Stream and high upper ocean heat content, and it'll be interacting with the trough. It's going to squeeze out some rain. I mean, this is going to be a big, big, big problem going north, and I don't want that to be ignored. Looking at the GFS from the 6Z run, if we zoom in on it, this is the sort of the hurricane version of the GFS. This is valid this afternoon, 2 p.m. this afternoon. Some of those winds with that large wind field coming onshore with north to north-northeast winds along the Florida East Coast, and then up the coast, it tracks the overall package. Hurricane force winds just offshore of Cape Canaveral, and then it turns more to the north with an increase in forward speed. And you see the pressures in there, 950s, 960s. There's a 967, so, you know, it's not intense from a pressure perspective, but it is a large, damaging weather system. And as you see, it cuts across, right across Cape Fear there, the GFS does, and then into Carteret County, finally exiting probably near Rodanthe, North Carolina. And you folks in the Carolinas, from the Low Country down here all the way up along the coast, even up to Kitty Hawk and maybe southeast Virginia, but especially the Outer Banks here proper, this could be a really substantial impact from high waves storm surge, and an area of heavy rain could set up in here that would cause a small window of extreme flooding. Not like what we saw last year, but streams and creeks would rise rapidly because it's going to be interacting, what we call this baroclinic interaction up here with the trough that's turning it. And we think about what happened with Floyd, with Matthew, those did the same thing. So I expect a northwest shield of very heavy rain to set up somewhere, and we need to be on the lookout for that. I will address that in future updates. And what we need to remember is these tropical systems have a variety of impacts. We focus on that wind and pressure surge now more than ever. Surge has definitely become more prevalent when we talk about these things, but the rainfall, that gets neglected too much, even today, after Harvey, after Florence, after Matthew, after Floyd, 20 years ago now, and others. Rainfall, big problem with flash flooding, and we need to focus on that. And I'll talk about that a lot more and frequently as we go forward, especially as we get some products from the National Weather Service to do so. All right, so now what are our plans? Tony, Brent, and myself will be leaving Florida here in just the next hour or so. We'll start making our way out of New Smyrna Beach. Huge thank you goes out to Mark from Orlando for allowing us to stay in the condo here. That is what crowdfunding, and it doesn't always mean $1 or more. It's the help. People have sent us equipment. I mean, it is just remarkable, and I appreciate that. So, Mark, thank you for letting us stay here again. We'll leave the place at least as good as we found it. So we're going to head up to the north. We're going to leave the camera system in Marineland. You know, why not? It should run for another 48 hours. And we've got somebody that's going to pick that up for us, and we appreciate that. And he'll ship it back to us, so no worries there. And so the plan is to set up a series of cameras right down here in Charleston along the Battery. I'll probably set up a live camera, and then I'm going to probably do at least a couple of GoPro systems in time-lapse mode, where they'll take a picture every 5 seconds for 3 days. Actually, it'll run longer than that. The video would only run for about 30 hours, so when we get there, I'll have to see if that's enough time. I don't think it would be. The video would probably run out. So we'll put it in time-lapse mode, taking one picture every 5 seconds. And believe me, that is, you get this amazing high-quality time-lapse from it. I mean, you could render it out in 4K. It's just incredible. I did that during Florence last year in Wilmington in the days after Florence. Anyhow, set one up in Charleston, and then we're going to set another camera up in Murrells Inlet, down here somewhere, Murrells Inlet, and make our way on up. Probably put one at Carolina Beach, another one up here in the Surf City area. I would like to have a camera system out here along Highway 12 in eastern Carteret County. Not much is out there, but just to show the impact of that wind that'll funnel in here off the Pamlico Sound and how it piles up the water out here in the Cedar Island area. And then from there, might have one in New Bern as well. Again, that long fetch coming in should pile up the Neuse River right into New Bern along Union Point. Head out to the Outer Banks, via land. All the ferries are going to be inoperable. And as long as the Emergency Management Director of Dare County grants me access, I should be able to get down to Hatteras Island. I have met with him before. He knows what I do. I have sent an email. So fingers crossed, they just need to let me across the checkpoint. I set up my stuff, and I will leave. Duh. I'm going to lose my vehicle out there if I don't. So the plan on the Outer Banks, and I can zoom in here and show you, would be to set up I'd like to put one of our weather stations on the new bridge over the Oregon Inlet. It could definitely hold it, and that would be remarkable data. It's a little far north, maybe, but that's where I'd like to put our weather station, one of our 2 weather stations. The other one I'm probably going to put down in Rodanthe, down here where we have a camera that's permanently mounted, but they're probably going to lose internet connectivity out there. So we'll use the wireless signal that I'll place an unmanned camera here, an unmanned camera perhaps at the new bridge, thinking about maybe something down here in Avon, and then something down here over in Hatteras Village, roughly. So we have the cameras, thanks to the crowdfunding, and people have helped out. That is what this Patreon allows me to do. And I work with the Weather Channel as a freelancer, and that helps too. And so, you know, we're able to do this. It's absolutely incredible, and I appreciate it. You know, it allows me to do what I was put here to do, and we're going to deploy this. And even though Florida, you know, you guys in Florida, as big of a headache as this was, and I'm going to talk about this later in a separate update where I discuss some things and try to help people deal with these things better. It's very stressful, and just be glad, though, that you're off the hook, and I hope people truly appreciate that. As anxious as those moments were that this could barrel across Florida as an intense hurricane, to now the impacts will be moderate at worst, be glad. And you don't need me to tell you that. I mean, hopefully it's very obvious, because further north, things could be different up here along the Outer Banks and elsewhere. So we'll see. Lots to discuss going forward and how we deal with these things, but I'm not going to worry about that today. All right, I will be driving in the next hour or so. We'll have the mobile cam running from our vehicle, so tune in on YouTube Live. It's there. And a lot of what I do now is on Patreon, so go to patreon.com/HurricaneTrack. You do not have to be funding what we're doing to view most of the content. It is only certain content that we provide exclusively for our patrons. Everybody else, you can read stuff in blog format. It's like Twitter, Facebook, and blogging kind of wrapped up into one. A remarkable platform, and I'm glad it's there, so check that out. All right, that's it from me. We're going to pack up here. Again, thank you so much, Mark, for letting us stay here. We appreciate it. And speaking of Mark, I am Mark Sept, HurricaneTrack.com. Thanks for watching. We'll talk again while we're on the road.